grandmother was quite gifted. She had many talents, and she knew a lot of practical things. I can remember her always making soap. I guess all the pioneers had to make their own soap, but I used to help her make soap, and she had a big black kettle, that we did it in the yard, and it was very interesting in that, but her soap was always kind of refined looking and nice looking bars, when other people's, bars warped and crooked and things. Everything she did with a definite style and a finish. She was really a craftsman at anything, and she was an immaculate housekeeper. Because they didn't have silver polish, we used to scrub the knives and forks, which I guess were steel or just iron or I don't know, but anyway, we used to scrub them with ashes and clean them. I've helped her clean all the knives and forks many times. Then when I went to years later, when I went to boarding school, grandmother had a little cottage in Mesa, and I used to spend weekends with her at school just to get off the campus. And this was when I taught my grandmother to tat. And her beautiful tatting, she did it so beautifully that it's kind of a prized possession of the whole family now, because she did a great many tatting things. She made a whole set of napkins even for me, but she'd use 2 and 3 shuttles at a time, in the design. Among other things, she made this little batiste baby dress that still is in our family. It's being handed down from generation to generation now, and it's very fine batiste with little finely made tatted medallions and a little scalloped, and she made it for her first great grandchild. Great. That's right. It was great. You're right, Mary. Grandmother, yes, she made a lot of beautiful quilts, and she had one quilt that was made from the pieces of very pretty soft challis. Challis used to be a favorite thing for dress-up dresses, with little flowers, little Dolly Varden type of flowers on it. But I remember this one quilt that grandmother had was made of narrow strips and quilted just so. Besides this, she did these beautiful tablecloths with lovely sprays of flowers, especially violets and pansies. She embroidery, yes. She had one tablecloth that I just envied so, and I wanted it so badly. But it was the one thing that she sort of kept as one of her little treasures. And then one day, long after I was married, I heard that one of my cousins had bought it from her, that she had finally sold it to them because they coaxed her for so long. So the next time I went to Mesa, I looked them up, and that stupid girl had washed that thing, and some of the colors had faded. And so it wasn't the treasure that it, should have been. And well, we didn't eat on those kind of tablecloths. We saved them for our, party and dress-up table occasions. And so naturally, if she ate on it and her children ate on it, well, then she would wash it. And anyway, it was ruined in the washing, which broke our hearts because it was one of these treasures. One of the pleasures at grandmother's house was a viewer that they called a stereopticon. You'd put a double picture up here. It had a long handle and a little brace out here, and you put it up close to your eyes. And there's a double picture out here, but when you look through, you see it single, and it gives it 3 dimensions. And I wanted that so badly, and Aunt Laura Johnson, my mother's youngest sister, had it for many years, and she gave. Finally, I asked her for it long after grandmother died if I couldn't have that someday, and she said, "Oh, that I didn't think anybody wanted that." She said, "I gave that to Don LeBaron. He was I think he was one of the garbage men, and he wanted it." And she said, "I just let him have it." And it's too bad when these things aren't valued, because Well, that was one of the pleasures of my visits to grandmother, that we always went through all her little views in the stereopticon. I have a big satin hand-painted fan that my mother kept all the years, and she says it was just in the family. It undoubtedly came from England in the beginning, but my mother's memory of it was that the children used it to take turns to fan their father during his last long illness. Many weeks he was ill, evidently, and they would take turns fanning him with this big fan, just for comfort. I remember how when grandmother visited us in Flagstaff, how hysterical she got one night, because you girls will remember how we used to undress in front of the fireplace, and whenever you'd get all your clothes off, you'd all dance in the nude and have a little fairy dance. And grandmother said we didn't think about it being so funny. It was just, I think Betty Jo must have started it, because Betty was always, the minute you'd take her clothes off to bathe her or to dress her or to undress her, the minute she got all her clothes off, she would streak through the house. And I think that's where streaking first began. She would run like mad, upstairs, downstairs. We always had to chase her and get her back.
How old was I?
And, well, you were 2 and 3. But Betty, it was so funny. We'd think, I would think, now I'm going to hang on to her, Couldn't get her nightgown over her head because she'd scoot and run. Then we'd chase. And so I think this is how the dancing in front of the fireplace started, because they would undress and put on their night clothes, but finally, when everybody'd get their clothes off, they'd dance while before they that was one of the cute things. But grandmother was simply hysterical. She never thought anything as funny.
But again, you don't have it on now, you do.
Well, I was pretty much of a loner in my early years.
Tomboy.
I was very much of a tomboy, and I later had a daughter who was a complete model. I took all of my recreation with my brothers. I learned to milk cows, and I played the boys' games, and especially marbles. I'll have to tell you about the marbles. And by the way, they had marbles on television the other day.
Right now.
And I got to be a real crack shot at marbles, because I learned to hold my agate, my flints on my thumb and shoot so that I could shoot real swift and hard and just crack them down. If you just use your thumbnail, you can only just flip it out like this. But if you get it like this, you've got pressure. So you hold the little thumb down there just as tight as you can. Well, anyway, I got to be a real crack shot. And so I would play for keeps with all the neighborhood boys, and I accumulated all their best agates and flints, and I had such a jar of all the beautiful marbles in the community, in the neighborhood, that my brothers would do anything in the world for these marbles, and I'd pay them off, get them to wash the dishes and do the things, that my jobs. I'd hire my brothers to do them and pay them off with marbles. Yes, I was such a show-off that it caught up with me one day. My sister and I, she was such a prissy. Her hair was curly, and she was pretty, and she could sing, and I was the little ugly duckling with the straight hair and the pigtails and probably freckles, and I never thought of myself as being worth looking at, hardly, because she was always the one in the white pinafore and the little starchy ruffles and she was always the one to show off in front of the company, always sing for the visitors and things like that. And so my show off was with my brothers, because I did everything they did, played all their games in every way. We also had another marble game called Purg, that we'd have little stations, and we'd have to go from station, and some of the stations would be difficult. It's kind of like this mini golf that you play, with difficult places to put your ball and shoot your marble. We'd even have some little nests up high on a pine tree, on a palm tree that you'd have to shoot up in these things.
Like goofy golf.
Yes, like that kind of thing. We used to play lots of purd too. But my show-off instincts caught up with me once when my sister and I were coming home from someplace, and we had to cross a 2-foot wide footbridge that went across the canal to get over to the canal into our front yard. Actually, the canal ran in front of our ranch. And so as it happened, there had been heavy summer rains in the mountains, and the canal was raging with muddy water and all kinds of debris, just tumbling, rolling, the mud so thick it could just hardly roll, and really a kind of a mad torrent. And my sister said to me, "Now you be careful walking across that bridge." And so old Smarty said, "Oh, that's nothing. I can walk that with my eyes shut." So I proceeded to walk boldly and rapidly across that bridge and walked triangle. She didn't even scream at me, and I walked right into I just walked right off the bridge, crooked, going across it. And as I fell in, I heard her scream, and that's the last I knew. Well, I was just swept down that swift torrent just like mad. I remember that right now I can just live through every instant that I was in the canal. And I had no control at all. I was just being tumbled, in this thick rolling muddy water. And somehow or other I had the presence of mind as I rolled against the bank to start clawing the bank, and I clawed my way up the muddy bank. And as I came up out of the muddy water, you can imagine what I looked like, a drowned rat. The whole family were screaming and running up and down the banks on each side, and as I climbed out, Grandpa, Dad Shuley came over and picked me up, and my mother rushed over and spanked me on the spot, and and Dad scolded her because after all I had just been saved from death. When we lived on the farm in North Mid, the vineyard, it was a vineyard farm. We raised seedless grapes and made raisins from them, and we did have our own garden and our own orchard, but there was a little China man who came around about once a week with a wagon of vegetables that my mother would buy fresh vegetables from him. And so one day he was there. He had a team of horses, and he let down the end gate at the back of the wagon, and they would stand there, and Mother would buy from the back of the wagon. So my older brother and I, Lester and I, climbed up on the brake. The brake on each side of the wagon. We climbed up on the brake. For some reason or another, as we were leaning over the sides of the wagon, for some reason the horses became frightened, and afterwards the little Chinaman thought it was my blowing dress. I wore in those days what they called little Mother Hubbards. They were just high-waisted, real full little dresses, and it was blowing in the wind, and it may have frightened horses, but I don't know what frightened them. But with Mother and the Chinaman standing at the back of the wagon, and my brother and I standing on the brake block on each side, leaning over into the wagon, the horses plunged and ran away down the road. Now, the road went a little distance, and then it turned right over a bridge on the canal, and then swung to the left again, making practically a letter S. And as the horses raced over the bridge and turned again, immediately to the left, the whole wagon tipped over, throwing us out into the field. And I was just skinned up. I was scratched up by the weeds and things like that, and bruised a little bit. But my brother was hit by Lester, the older brother. He was hit by a sack of potatoes, and he was unconscious for 2 or 3 days. We didn't know whether he would live or not. Undoubtedly, it was a concussion, but he did recover. But I came through with just a few scratches. But the poor Chinaman, his wagon was demolished, and his whole, all of his vegetables and everything were scattered and were a total loss. And we didn't know who to blame. Yes, it was strange that neither of us had any broken bones. In fact, I never had a broken bone in my life until I was about 65 when I was bowling. I'll have to tell you that bowling story. It ought to go in here someplace. I don't know really why I started bowling, because they built a new bowling alley in Flagstaff. I was 65 years old, and I always thought this was a funny story about it. I went out there and signed up. Everybody laughed at me when I walked in, because I'm sure I was the oldest one that presented themselves, but I couldn't see any reason why I shouldn't bowl. I was a golfer, and a good one. And bowling looked attractive to me, too. So anyway, I did bowl and got to be a top bowler, had my name on the honor roll. But when the family knew that I thought about bowling, they signed up and gave me a bowling ball for Christmas that was, made to my size and fitted to my hand and everything. On the Christmas tree, I got this envelope that I was to go out and be fitted for a bowling ball presented by the family. So when I went out to the bowling alley and took this certificate to Mr. What's his name out there? Do you know his name? Right this minute I can't say it. But anyway, I said to him, I said, my children are giving me a bowling ball, and I said, I want this put in my obituary that when I was 75 years old, my children gave me my first bowling ball, and I thought he would laugh a little. Instead of that, he looked deeply serious, and he said, by God, that's all right. I bowled for about 2, maybe 3 years, and I really got to be a top bowler with my name on the honor roll. But nobody in the family had ever bowled. Joe wouldn't bowl with me. Nobody bowled with me. I just was captain of the team out there, and I really did enjoy it. Day or night, rain or shine, summer or winter, you have bowling, and it's just something that's there all the time, and I think it's a great sport. But one night, early evening, the telephone rang, and I had my shoes off. I went to the telephone, and as I went back to my room, Joe called me. And I said, what do you want? And turned around and kicked the table leg and broke a middle toe on my left foot. This is the only bone that's ever been broken in my body. And for 6 months I couldn't wear a bowling shoe. I couldn't get a shoe on. And I started painting again, and so I've never gone back to bowling. Painting replaced it. I have developed my painting to the extent now that it is I say I'm happiest when I'm painting. Not that I'll ever do a masterpiece, but I do acceptable work, and there's such a great happiness in it, and I recommend it to everybody. And so the children have asked me if anybody else in our family ever painted. And I remember that I had an uncle, my mother's, one of her half-brothers. I think his name was Phil Peterson. He was a natural. I don't think he really had instruction. And sometime or other during my lifetime, his wife gave me one of his paintings. It's some little chickens picking at a shell like on the seashore, like the seashell. Dear little picture, and it'll be something for the family. And I'd like to have it cleaned up. We'll have to find it now. Well, my mother had about 20 years of very delicate health, and because of the extreme hot weather, Dad Shuley used to send her away at least during July and August, to get out of the heat in the valley. And so one year, Dad announced that we were all going to go on a summer vacation with Mother. And so we packed up the big lumber wagon, and we had these gorgeous big sorrel horses that we loved. So their name was Tom and Frank. Funny names for horses, but anyway. Then we had 2 or 3 saddle horses and 1 burro. And because my brothers felt superior, the burro always fell to me. And and they were always, I was about 10, 11, and they were always impatient with me because I was always behind. The burro couldn't keep up, and they were always having to wait, till the burro caught up. And of course, I nudged him on as best I could, but it didn't bother me. I kind of liked his pace anyway. It sort of gave me time to dream along. I never minded riding the burro. In fact, I was quite proud. I used to get to ride one of the horses once in a while, but hardly ever because the boys usurped them. But we went up into the Mokion Rim country, and in those days, those roads were just simply rocky trails. It reminded the roads remind me of the road that still exists going into Shanto up here on the Indian reservation, where it's absolutely solid rock and so rugged that you just crawl over it. And on the solid rock bank, the Indians have chiseled many years no good road. Is the same?
No damn good.
Oh, is that what it says? Many years, road no damn good. Well, we finally spent the summer at Heber at the Baca Ranch there, and we had a wonderful time. My sister brought along her chum, a girl her own age, and they both could sing beautifully, and they were the big attraction of the cowboys wherever we went. The cowboys liked to sing too, but they just flocked to those girls. They were teenagers and they could dance, and the cowboys would get a fiddler, and we danced in all the schoolhouses all over the rim country, and finally we ended up down here at Pine. And one day Dad Shuley said to me, we'll take a ride. And that day I had a horse and rode with him, and we rode over what they call the Divide, 5 miles over into Strawberry Valley. And I remember him stopping the horses on a high hill overlooking the valley, and he said, "This is very much like Stulingen, Germany, like my home in Germany." He simply fell in love with the country, the view, and back here in a wooded cove there was a ranch for sale, and it had a real nice rock house. There were very few stone houses, rock well-built houses. This was a especially nice house, and it had a windmill, the only windmill in the valley, and a lovely well. A creek, beautiful little storybook creek running at the back of the house, at the back of the lot, and just enough acreage for cultivation where they grew alfalfa. There was enough water for irrigation and alfalfa and all. But anyway, by the time the summer was ended, we rode over there 2 or 3 different times, and so then Dad Shuley bought the ranch, and with it there was herd of cattle that was branded with S. Hart, Sweetheart, the Sweetheart brand, and that was our brand from that time on. And of course my sister and her chums, she always brought a friend home every summer. Why? And that's where the Sweetheart girls lived, and I'm sure the cowboys enjoyed that. But by evening, there would be a bunch of cowboys riding in, one or two at a time, and we had a back porch that was a very popular place for us to assemble. Or if the boys, there were some horses, untamed horses that came with the ranch too, and Dad surely had those rounded up and had the cowboys, ride them, break them. They called it breaking a horse. And so at the time that the cowboys would break a horse, we'd all sit on the high rail fence around the corral and watch the performance, the bucking horses. But they were great summers. There were a little log schoolhouse, maybe half a mile from our place, and there was an organ in this schoolhouse. It was never locked. So 2 or 3 times a week we'd dance down there. My sister and I could both play the organ, and once in a while we'd have a fiddler. But it was singing, dancing, and horseback riding, and just beautiful summers. And then late in the summer, when the corn got ripe, they'd raid people's corn patches and have a corn roast. Supposed to be a sneaky thing, like stealing watermelons. We'd also steal watermelons and steal corn. And
they drink moonshine?
No, we really didn't. The cowboys were most respectful about drinking, even when they had established dances like going to Pine and dancing in the schoolhouse. That was all under supervision of the Mormon people over there, and there was never, if there was ever any liquor, it was always out behind the trees or something, and if anybody drank, they did it absolutely privately. I don't ever remember seeing a drunk cowboy the whole time that we were up there. Did I tell you about the time when I won the ladies' race?
No.
We had several beautiful thoroughbred horses that came with the farm, and one of them was racing stock, and it was a mare, and her name was Phoebe, by the way. So Dad Shuley immediately assigned her to me because my first name is Phoebe. So Phoebe was my horse, and she was a beauty. And when the Mormons had their celebration on the 24th of July, that's their pioneer celebration time, they had races and different contests, and so I was over there, and the cowboys said, would you ride in the ladies' race? And I was delighted because I knew that Phoebe was by instinct a racing stock, because when I would gallop her, she would always outdistance the horses, just out of pride, She'd always gallop where she could always beat, when we just had a little group riding, she'd always what. Anyway, I rode in the ladies' race, and they passed the hat, and the silly thing of it was Phoebe outdistanced the other horses, and I checked her up, reined her up where I thought was the end of the line, and it wasn't. The other horses came and passed her, and we still had quite a little distance to run yet, and she overtook them and still won, even though I had let them catch up with us once, partway down the race. And I got the cowboy hat with $15 in it for winning the ladies' race. Everybody screamed at me, go on. You see, I stopped her. I checked her up too soon, reined her up too soon. And the other horses caught up with her. She still went ahead and outdistanced them and won the race for me. I was about 15, I think. This was fabulous land that we had in this place, and somehow or other the climate and the water and the land and everything, we had the most beautiful garden. We'd have cabbages just 5 times the size of any cabbage I had ever seen in my life, and we raised bell peppers and tomatoes, and everything just grew like wild. We were just devoted to the garden that we could raise there. Everybody, the reason the house was kind of special because it was a stone rock, built of rock and stone. Everybody's houses were lumber houses because there were sawmills, around through the forest at various places. Up at Long Valley, there was quite a big